All right, YouTube Live is up.
Sarah, have you dyed your hair pink?
Yes, I did. Well, I didn't. Someone else did.
I love it.
Excellent. Thanks, Norm. I'll just check it, make
Wasn't
sure
quite the
it's
colour we
running.
agreed on, but
Sorry, I know this isn't officially part of the conversation, but I just was like, hang on, wait a moment. I need to be
Important part
involved
of
in
regional
whatever is
arts.
coming. Because I am loving that. Also with the background that you have, those beautiful
with
With the flamingos, right?
babes, it is next level. I'm living for it today. Thank you very much.
I've been locked in too long.
I've been locked in. I don't even have access to hair dye. That's how long I've been locked in.
Okay,
I'm gonna mute.
we're running live on YouTube and on the Arts Front page. So that's good. So I'm also going to mute.
Hi there all. Just waiting to see a few more minutes, see everyone join in, and then we'll kick off. Morning, Joe.
Just
1 minute till not longer morning. Just wait another little moment and then officially say hello to everybody. While we just wait for a few people to join in and log in, might just start by saying hi to everybody and to just do a few little things. But firstly, absolutely like to acknowledge that I'm zooming in from the Kulin Nation, and Joe too, my colleague who is chatting today with his own intro, is also zooming in from the Kulin Nation. But on behalf of Regional Arts Australia, would like to acknowledge all the lands and all the countries of which we're all zooming in, and pay our respects to the elders past and present, and particularly acknowledge the challenging situation for our First Nations people as we navigate COVID in these times. So big shout out there. I'm going to introduce myself in a little bit, and Joe, but firstly, I think people will be familiar with the housekeeping, but just to run through a few things of sort of general housekeeping of how Little Lunch rolls. Today's Little Lunch is 30 minutes. It's being recorded, it's being streamed live, and it will be available afterwards on the llol.com.au website, the Little Lunch website. Just a matter of just so everyone can hear. Please keep your mic muted when you're not speaking. It would be great if you introduce yourselves, and I can see that pretty much people are doing this through using the chat, the Zoom chat group. If you let us know who you are and what country you're coming in from, and use that form to ask any questions or have any comments as we go, because we really want this to be very much a chat. There's a captioning button bottom left, and there's live closed captioning available through that, and also Auslan signing. So if you want to go to the Auslan, you can just pin the Auslan video. So massive shout out to the captioning and the Auslan support today, and really appreciate that. And it's great that we can support access and diversity in through this forum. So I'm Ros Abercrombie, the Executive Director of Regional Arts Australia. And my colleague and a long-term friend, actually, Joe Tui, is having a chat today and will introduce himself.
Hi, everybody. My name's Joe Tui. I'm the Executive Director at Regional Arts Victoria, zooming into you today from the lands of the Kulin Nation, and extend my respects and Rav's respects to elders, past, present, and emerging, and wherever you might be on the various places that you're dialing in from. Outside of Regional Arts Victoria, I'm also a board member with Grey Community Arts Centre, work with the Arts Industry Council in Victoria and a couple of other odds and sods.
And I thought it might be good, just a little bit of a sort of overview of how both Regional Arts Australia and Regional Arts Victoria actually work together, just a little bit of structural, which I think sometimes can be a bit confusing, and certainly just a bit of an overview in that space. So Regional Arts Australia is the national peak body, the national voice for arts in Regional Australia. And we have regional program administrators in every state and territory. And Regional Arts Victoria are our program administrator in Victoria. So that's sort of how the structure sits. There's a national peak body, and then there's these state-based bodies that are representative of each of those states and territories. So Regional Arts Victoria, which Joe is the CEO, Victoria, Regional Arts New South Wales, Country Arts South Australia, Regional Arts WA in WA, Darwin Community Arts in NT, Flying Arts Queensland in Queensland, and RANT in Tasmania. So that just sort of helps put this sort of scope around. Organisationally, Regional Arts Australia is quite small. We are of a 2.4 in EFT, but actually quite large in our reach. We have a board member in every state and territory. And we run a decentralised office. We don't have a head office. We run a virtual office through Zoom predominantly, and we have staff in WA, NT, Tassie, and Victoria. Joe, is there anything else you want to add to that? About Rav?
Pretty good national summary there, Ros. Just one of the things that we'll probably talk about in the way that states and national bodies work together is that each of the setups in all of the different states is slightly different. And so depending on where you're dialing in from today, you'll have a slightly different context and experience of working with your state bodies, or in some instances, state bodies plural, in terms of plugging into the regional arts scene, which I think is one of the strengths of the way that we work together, is that there is that allowance for those local and state level responses to needs as they develop at a local and state level.
So we're going to sort of ask each other a couple of questions and talk through what both our organisations are doing and responding, and also what we think what we're seeing from the ground, the needs of both immediate recovery packages and more long-term packages need to be. But we're also, as I said earlier, very keen that we bring this conversation to everyone, and we can have a conversation about what you're experiencing and what the needs are from each of your organisations or each of your artistic practices. More generically, as a sort of general kick-off, we sort of wanted to put a bit of context around what the Regional Arts Centre from our perspective has been experiencing, and to where we are now. And obviously I can put that national lens on, and Joe will be able to bring the state-based lens as well to that. And I think it's probably important to start with that while we're in this COVID-19 response from a regional perspective, and it's been very much part of our advocacy and our communication, is that the regional and remote sector has been in drought, and then bushfire, and floods, and then COVID. And so actually the regional sector is dealing with multiple levels of response, relief, need, and actually multiple levels of recovery planning, so that we can essentially really support both drought, bushfire and COVID, both independently and also together. And that's been one of the things that's been at the forefront of our work since the end of December, the beginning of January, where we've been advocating at industry roundtables advocating into the federal government for responses to bushfires and most recently into COVID-19. And that's also very much forming part of what our response is looking like. I think it probably is pertinent to make mention to the announcement of $10 million in the recovery boost that was announced just before Easter. The timelines are running really fast at the moment, so a couple of weeks ago. And to acknowledge that 10 million and that was greatly appreciated on Regional Arts Australia's part and that of our members. And just to put a bit of context there is that advocacy for the $10 million recovery boost was always around looking at the Regional Arts Fund and saying Regional Arts Australia and the members and regional program administrators run the Regional Arts Fund, and it's a mechanism that can be scaled up and a mechanism that is responsive to the needs of the state and territories, and a mechanism that is also flexible in being able to provide recovery first and foremost. The second part is that the regional program, the regional fund, can be flexible and responsive to the states and territories' needs. And I'll flip to Joe, because a lot of the success in being able to advocate and communicate that message was Regional Arts Victoria, Regional Arts New South Wales' ability to work with their membership and their artists on the ground and provide data analysis and impact analysis of what's happening and what the effects were and what the needs were. And that was what we were then able to take up to the federal government and be in a position now where we actually have been successful in receiving a stimulus package for recovery. Flip to you, Joe.
Yeah, thank you, Ros. I've just noticed a question in the group chat as well, and maybe I'll come to that one. I'll have a crack at that one straight after adding our two Bob's reference. So I guess just in terms of the response in regional Victoria, it's not it will come as no surprise the impact that COVID-19 has had on some of the recent bushfires here, because it's a similar story, I think, across the country. But this is as an example, we had Regional Arts Victoria we've got about 200 organisations who are organisation members of Regional Arts Victoria based around the state. And one of the benefits that they have through that is access to discounted insurance that's purchased at a group level. A couple of organisations offer something similar. We worked with our insurer because we suspected that public liability insurance, which is based on turnover and audience numbers, that people might want to revise their turnover and audience number projections based on what had happened in the last 3 or 4 months. And just in the sample that we got back of about 70 organisations, their projections had dropped by 45% in about 3 months in terms of turnover and 65% in terms of audience. So we were already 3 or 4 months into that year. It runs from October, from August each year. So that's really just a small subset of what is happening across the state. It links into the question that Elliot has put forward about the shock announcement of Carrick Works going to administration and the situation for our regional arts centres. One of the gaps remaining in terms of any national, or at least in Victoria, state responses is support for local government-run spaces and art centres. And the reality in Victoria is that the performing arts centres and galleries in our regional spaces tend to be owned by local government, and through programs like JobKeeper and even some of the funding responses that have been announced so far, they're not eligible to receive that support. And so Victorian Association of Performing Arts Centres and the Public Galleries Association in Victoria here have both made it quite clear that their members are in, it's a particularly challenging situation for them, in that they haven't been able to access those support, and often their local government, the local governments running them, are for a variety of reasons asking staff within those spaces to be redeployed or down in the interim. That's right. So the owned galleries and sorry, I'm just responding to a comment. They're not eligible for JobKeeper. And Rob Robson also had it from the West Gippsland Arts Centre. Had an article in Arts Hub. I think it was last week that came out. just articulating what some of the challenges are for that sector. So I don't know if CarriageWorks is the first. It's definitely the largest that I've seen that's gone into administration. A couple of smaller organisations have shut up shop for a little while, but that's the situation. I think is still extremely challenging for a lot of those regional arts centres.
And I think on that, Joe, like we've been talking about it in our collective group and our network, is that a lot of this we're dealing with still is that immediate relief, but we're starting to also start to have to look at what the rest of the year, what 2021, 2022 looks like, because I'm quite acutely aware that this isn't something that's just going to sort of be fixed or snap into some other new world by June. It's going to be that we have to look at a series of stages and a series of support mechanisms probably over a good couple of years, and how we navigate that. I just saw a question up there from, I think it was from Melissa. I'm just going to go back up in relation to, where is it? Here we go. How do you communicate with the broader unfunded sector that may not be under umbrella of state orgs and your members? We have a regional program administrator, as I said, in every state and territory. And so any organisation, unfunded sector, is eligible to, who's eligible can apply through the Regional Arts Fund, and it's not specific to members at all. And so Flying Arts Queensland is the regional program administrator in Queensland, and they are who manage and distribute the Regional Arts Fund on behalf of Regional Arts Australia to Queensland. Does that help answer that question, or is there another follow-up to that? Just tweet me if there is. Sorry, Joe, did you going to say something?
Yeah, and just in terms of the ongoing communication with them, one of the roles that again, the structure is different in each state, but in Victoria, the large percentage of the members that Regional Arts Victoria works with in regional Victoria are unfunded or funded on a kind of project-to-project level in terms of their operations.
So just to outline a bit around this, the 10 million stimulus package and the Regional Arts Fund, just so that, because it can be, I know it's a bit confusing sometimes from the outside, but essentially Regional Arts Australia has a deed with the federal government, and we manage the Regional Arts Fund on behalf of the government. We then have the regional program administrators, which I mentioned earlier, who then we devolve the funding to them, and then they, within the objectives and the guidelines, they design programs that meet the needs of their states and territories. So it's really important that the Regional Arts Fund is nimble and flexible to that, because obviously Victoria has different needs to Queensland. Queensland has very different needs to parts of NT. So there's a flexibility around that. The 10 million, we're currently in the process of getting that to a point where the program framework is designed. We've got a few more steps to go to be able to communicate that more publicly, but the intention is that will be a 3-phase program. So it will look at immediate short-term relief, look at medium sort of recovery, and look at long-term renewal. And so we're working through those program guidelines and the framework, and then we'll be working with those regional program administrators who will then be able to design their programs within the parameters of those stages to meet the needs of their states and territories. So hopefully that provides a little bit of context there.
Ros, you've got a question about Artlands as well, about the reframing of Artlands,
Yep.
and what that means for the coming for 2021, but also for the remainder of this year.
Yeah, sure. So in context of Artlands, I think probably just to go through that, we were always looking at reframing Artlands going forwards. Predominantly, we want to make sure that Artlands is accessible and more accessible, and acutely aware that it's been challenging for particularly independent artists to get to, and requiring significant funding to get individual and independent artists to Artlands gatherings, and very aware of that. So within the Artlands rethinking, we've been looking at ways to address issues of accessibility and access, and we've also been looking at making sure that we partner strategically partner in our programming space of Artlands so that we shine a light on what is already happening in regional and remote Australia, because what becomes increasingly apparent is that its regional practice is extraordinary and diverse and has an amazing depth. And we want to actually work with that and build communication and commentary and narrative around that, rather than bringing programming into and on top of that. Hence the partnership with Junction and Launceston. And that also has the history of being 10 years of Junction, and also celebrating 10 years since the original Artlands went to Launceston and Junction emerged from that. So that's some context to that. Going forwards, we had every intention of delivering Artlands in September, Artlands 2020 in September in Launceston with Junction. However, we can't due to COVID. So we're looking at how we can do different narratives and different conversations over this year through different channels that then feed into delivery mechanisms next year. And those delivery mechanisms will be at a junction towards September next year. But ideally, we're looking at ways in which we can connect more broadly into different states and territories so that we can continue that narrative and that conversation. And we'll be putting communication out about that in the coming weeks. And if anyone put their EOIs in, thank you, because we will be talking to you about how we can start these conversations. Just seen it pop up that we've only got 30 minutes left. It just goes quick, doesn't it? We wanted to talk about how sort of local projects are what we see. I guess from our point of view, we see that local and regional can lead the way in recovery. And I guess we wanted to talk around how that can be seen as different, and how potentially regional and remote can actually really lead us into the next phase and into a recovery space here. And I'd like to sort of throw that to Joe, because I'm very aware of some amazing work that's happening in that space.
Yeah, thank you, Ros. And sorry, I'll try and talk a bit more into my microphone for those who might have struggled to hear it before. Look, a couple of, just maybe to flip it to the positive, a couple of the examples that I've seen of things happening in regional Victoria in response largely to COVID-19, but also in response to some of the bushfires. There's just been a number of regional companies that have done, and artists that have done things smaller and larger that have just excited me and kept some hope going. So seeing the Ballarat International Photo Biennale, for example, is running a mass isolation project where it's part of an international program, but coming out of Ballarat, this idea of, which has been picked up in a couple of conversations that I've had, just the role of artists in documenting what's happening, as well as to our communities through this crisis, is going to be really important. And so a process that they're curating, where photos are being put online of people's experiences of living in isolation, which I think is going to be a really important, both local but also internationally connected response to what's happening, and how this experience is being documented. On a slightly smaller, no less important, but a smaller and perhaps more of a fun response that I've seen. One of the first ones was from the Potato Shed in Drysdale, which is a small a community venue based not too far out of Geelong. And one of the first things that they set up was a live stream of the bird bath in the grounds of the Potato Shed. And it became such a, I was just running the video, the live stream of the bird bath at the back of the Potato Shed in the background whilst working for a number of days, because the birds weren't always turning up to take their bath on the times that I was tuning in to watch it on the video. But the sounds of Drysdale in the background, I think, were just a nice little, when feeling like the best part of my job is always spending time on the road and in some of these regional communities, and feeling some of that absence, just to be able to touch base or to tune in to some of the sounds of Drysdale, even if I couldn't physically get there, was just a really nice experience. So there's a couple of other things that I think are bubbling away, that particularly in some of the bushfire impacted areas of northeast Victoria and East Gippsland, where it will be a slightly different proposition for them to design recovery projects and initiatives, where the instinct and the desire is for people to come together as a community. The opportunity to come together as a community is obviously slightly different at the moment. So just how some of those really recently impacted bushfire communities respond to that is going to be a bit of a watch this space one. But I've seen a couple of things and a few propositions for winter events through there that should they come to fruition in the coming months, I think will also just really reinforce what I'm feeling and what I'm saying.
Thanks, Joe. Keen to sort of bring everyone, we see everyone's sort of questions on here, keen to sort of get any questions from you and be able to answer things if we can. I guess from our perspective, like from Regional Arts Australia's perspective, one of our jobs is to advocate on our members and our RPAs, and also on your behalf, and to be able to advocate at all levels of government. And so it's important that we understand all the different needs and all the different responses that are required, both right now and also in the future. And in relation to, like, I guess, our KPIs and us being sort of accountable, within our strategic plan, we have like 4 main goals. And the one's to raise the profile of arts in regional Australia. The other is to make sure that regional arts are considered in the development of national policy. And that's something important here that we've been working really hard to connect the arts and see the arts as essential across regional policy. And so while we don't have necessarily an arts policy, we do have a regional policy, and it's really important that we continue to work to embed and make sure the arts are seen as essential across that policy. It's also to increase resources to regional remote practice and artists. And I guess in the context of like COVID, what's happened is that that's just been given a massive magnifying glass on our work. And so a lot of the conversations that we've been having over the last couple of years have just been amplified. And I guess, Joe, is probably the same for you, is that it's that we're now in a space where there is a sight line, and we're having communication channels are open, and we are being heard, which is an amazing position to be in. And it's really important that we continue to connect and continue to find out what the impacts are and what the effects are having, so that we can consolidate that into both data and also granular case studies, and feed that both at a state-based level, as Joe would represent, and a national level that Regional Arts Australia can represent. Joe, do you want to highlight that at all, or should we go to the questions?
It probably links in. There was a question that was up a little bit, not a question, a comment that somebody was reflecting on the danger of losing some of the soft infrastructure through this period as well. And I'm acutely aware of that, and it's probably emphasised that it's been some of the relationship and soft infrastructure work, I guess, that Regional Arts Victoria, in our experience, and also observing Regional Arts Australia's work, that has enabled some of the responses that we have now. And so it's not necessarily being able to solve that problem for that commenter a little bit earlier on, but it has emphasised to me that the things that are going to get us through the next little period are the same things that are have always been the measure of strength and weaknesses, which is the strength of the relationships and the communication lines between some of those smaller orgs, the larger orgs, but also decision makers in state and federal government. There's a question too, Ros, around what extent RAA interacts and works with state government arts departments.
Yeah, I just saw that one, and the one above as well, the freelance artists as well. So just to take both of those on, we do work really closely with state governments, but always first and foremost through our members or the RPAs, because that relationship absolutely is first and foremost. And then, but we do have those conversations, and we're very aware of each other's work, and we do make sure that it's a cross-government response. And one of the things that has come out of this experience of the last 3 months is the communication channels across both state and federal government, and how we're all working together has been really welcome, and it's been incredible to facilitate, be part of that facilitation, that response. The other question around the 10 million for the Regional Arts Fund, it does sit as separate to the other, I guess, the Job Seeker and JobKeeper packages. And from our understanding, there's a whole of government response, which is the JobKeeper, Job Seeker, and the cash flow boosts and all of those packages. And then there's specific sort of recovery packages, and they do see different, and very aware that there are some, and as we talked about earlier, particularly like local government venues that are falling through the gaps, and freelance artists also falling through that gaps in some cases. But from the all of government response, the intention is that there's as much net as possible. The success of the Regional Arts Fund being increased to the 10 million comes from, as I said before, from the sort of the droughts, the bushfire and the COVID, and the multiplier impact that the regional remote sector has felt. And also from the fact that the arts and creative industries can lead and will lead the recovery, and that they are essential in regional recovery and essential to work in regional towns and regional orgs. So it's been seen that the recovery programs and the recovery projects are respected, and that has been supported in that space as well. I'm just scrolling down to see if there's more questions there, so I don't want to miss people's questions. You see anything, Joe?
There's a question. There was a question about, I can't remember. I've lost it. It was something about the areas. So just in terms of where the eligibility for the fund, it is still set. The definition of regional from the national fund is still set by the national government, so by the federal government. It's been interesting that in Victoria, the Victorian government's definitions of regional are different again. So they're in terms of how they design where those funds go, there are criteria which we can change, and others that are given to us. And one of those is that the definitions of regional versus at a national level. And it remains an issue for Queensland, and also in different ways has been an issue for Victoria sometimes as well. And it's even navigating which one you're eligible for and when is an ongoing challenge. So yeah. That's here too.
And I guess in response to that, there's always, unfortunately, there's always going to be a cutoff and a perimeter. And we're aware where there's some fall-offs in that space, and acutely aware of that. And that's something that we're working to, and our colleagues are working on. But within the frame of what we have to work with, we do our best with what we have to work with in that space. Conscious of the time, very happy to also have conversations with people outside of this space, particularly in relation to the Regional Arts Fund, and we can certainly carry on that conversation and provide any materials that might be helpful for anybody. Hopefully, in the coming not too distant future, we'll be able to put some communications out around what the recovery package will look like, and how everyone will be able to tap into that. We've just got a few more, as you would understand, a few more hurdles and administrative things to tidy up, but we're working as fast as we can to that space. Thank you so much for coming along. Thank you for the Ferals and Arts Front. You are rock stars. And so thank you so much. And Elliot, you're the invisible rock star, but you're an extra rock star, especially in that T-shirt. Thanks, Joe, for all your ongoing work. It's extraordinary to work beside you and see what you do. Please all stay in touch and keep talking to us, because without the conversations, without everybody, that's what we're here for. We need to understand those conversations. We need to understand your needs and your narratives. Keep talking to us. Thank you.
Bye.